Well, you could be a wonderful and devoted parent, and your child may still grow up to hate you. Here was some advice is the author of When Parents Hurt, Compassionate Strategies When You and Your Grown Child Don't Get Along. Please welcome Dr. Joshua Coleman. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I know you have 3 children.
I do.
Twin boys that are younger, and then you have a grown daughter. Did you ever face any of these similar problems of resentment and distance between you and her?
Well, unfortunately, I did. I was married and divorced in my 20s, and my daughter's now 26, and we're very close now. But there was a period of time when she was in the 20 to 23 range where she was mad at me a lot, didn't want to have a lot of time with me, would be resentful, wouldn't return my calls. And it was a very, very painful and difficult time. And so some of the strategies that I developed to reconnect with her and to heal myself during that time, because it was very painful, was part of what inspired the book.
Well, how did it make you feel? Did you think it was your fault somehow?
Well, she felt in some ways displaced, and when I been remarried for some 20 years, and my wife and I had twins, and often being in a blended family is very difficult. And she in some ways felt displaced when the twins came along. So in some ways I did feel responsible and really tried hard to make amends to her, and fortunately I was successful.
Yeah, I read one of the letters in the beginning of your book. It was so heartbreaking because the daughter wrote her mom saying, "Don't ever contact me again. I don't want any, contact with you at all."
Right.
Goodbye, basically.
Right.
I mean, what do you do? It almost seems like you only have one more chance as a parent to respond to that letter, or, I mean, what steps do you take?
It's a really important question, and I get a lot of letters like that from heartbroken parents on my blog at whenparentshurt.com. Parents who are writing in and say, not only have I been cut off from my kids, I've been cut off from my grandkids as well. And these parents they're heartbroken, they're disoriented, you can imagine you have older children, how awful that would be. So the first thing that you need to do is to try to understand why your child feels the way that they do. Really try to get into their head. It's very natural when we're parents to want to defend ourselves, to want to say, well, think how much I sacrificed for you, or I was a much better parent than my parents were, or list all of the ways that you were a good parent. That's the wrong thing to do. At that point in time, your child's letting you know that there's something really wrong with your relationship. So you really want to get inside their head and empathize with them and make amends for whatever ways that you feel like you did make mistakes.
Well, then you would hope this self-examination would lead to some answers, but suppose you're the kind of parent you describe in the book where the parent who's been devoted, loving, listened, sensitive, and the kid still resents you. How do you get to the root of that?
Well, you still have to stay empathic. You still want to keep reaching out to your child, keep trying to connect with them. Assume that they're telling you these things for a reason, that there's a valid concern behind it, even if you've been a good parent. I work with more and more parents these days who have been really dedicated. And when you hear what the kids' complaints are, they're really small in the scheme of what parents could do. It's not child abuse, not alcoholism, not addiction, not neglect. It's usually something more subtle. But the parent still has to start from the perspective that the child has a valid reason for those feelings and continue to reach out for them. Don't give up. So many of the parents that I work with get discouraged, partly because it makes them feel so guilty and so bad, so they give up prematurely. You want to just stay in the game.
Is it ever one person's fault?
Well, sometimes it is. I mean, many of the cases that I work with where kids have cut off their parents, it is because the parent was abusive or highly critical or rejecting. Divorce is often a reason why kids can turn against their parents. Either there was less support for the kid, or sometimes one of the parents pulls the child against the other parent. So there are sometimes mistakes that parents make that cause this. Often there's some mistakes that have been caused.
I'm going to ask you to break something down for me and make it really simple. You talked about reaching out to the child and keep on reaching out. What's an example of what you can say, what you might say? The words, because it's difficult to find the right thing to say.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. You mostly want to get inside their heart and mind. You mostly want to say, let's say you can't really understand it. Then you want to say something like, well, there are separate realities in every family. From my perspective, I thought I was being a good father to you or a good mother, but I guess I was wrong. I guess that I really didn't see it. I guess that you were experiencing something when we were growing up that I completely missed, and I'm really sorry. I should have been able to see that. I'm sorry that I missed that. I know you wouldn't be telling me these things if you didn't have good reasons for your feelings. I mean, if you come from that perspective, your kid they're gonna feel like you're really trying. Unfortunately, so many parents make the opposite, stay chance and go, well, I think of all the good things I did for you. Think of how much I sacrificed for you. Think of how much money I spent on you. And it's all true, but it doesn't really get you where you want to go.
And is it ever helpful or appropriate to let the child know how much it breaks your heart that you're not as close as you want to be?
It can be helpful, sure, because kids don't always know. Kids don't always see us as being as vulnerable as we are. Our kids don't always know how much we actually need them. We need our children in some ways more than they need us as they get older. So it can be helpful for a child to say, well, not in a guilt-tripping way, but to say, it breaks my heart that we have this between us, that we're not close the way I want us to be.
What about other factors? Should we look at who their peers are, you know, socioeconomic factors, who they hung out with, where you grew up? Is that part of it too?
Well, right. We currently live in a culture where parents are made to feel like if something went wrong, it's all their fault. And the reality is there are many things that go into making a human being. Partly it is the peers that they grow up with, what kind of position they played in the family in terms of their siblings, what their socioeconomic level was, what kind of neighborhood they grew up with, what their genetics were like, what their inherited temperament is like. There's so many things that cause us to be a human, yet our society blames parents for everything. You know, if the kids don't turn out well, or they're in a Columbine, or they become drug addicts, people go, well, it's the parents' fault. The parents must have screwed up. Well, it isn't always the parents' fault. But that's an important thing for parents to remind themselves of. It's an important thing for us to tell to ourselves as parents. It's not, we don't want to tell our kids that.
So helpful. What was that blog again? Because I'm sure a lot of parents can go on there and just relate to other parents going through the same thing.
There's a lot of parents on there. It's at whenparentshurt.com.
Okay, and the book is When Parents Hurt. Dr. Coleman, thank you so much for giving us that insight.
Advice.
Thanks so much
Very
for having me.
helpful.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, need some storage?